Hello, hello, hello. Today we're going to be building up our internal map of the body using isometric contractions. Okay, so I'm just going to run us through a whole bunch of different coordinations, and hopefully by the end we'll feel like we have more of a body to live in. Okay, so we're going to start just with the hands and feet. Okay, and the goal here today is to try to build up as much internal sense of the body as we can. So as we're doing this, you can have the eyes closed or not, or even better if you have a mirror to see yourself. But you just want to focus on trying to feel the difference from side to side in the body. Okay? So we're going to start first just by pumping the hands open and closed. Okay? And then we're going to add the feet to this. Okay, so if we practice now only the feet, and we're just squeezing with the toes, drawing the toes up, making as much of a fist as you can. So you're basically trying to make the same movement in the feet. Do this a few times, get a feel for that. See if one foot feels particularly different than the other. Okay. Now we're going to combine both the hands and the feet. And we're going to do these contractions a little bit slower now the areas are woken up. So we're going to take a few seconds to close both the hands and the feet, squeezing tightly and releasing slowly. Back to zero tension in the body. And we go again, squeezing the hands and feet together and releasing. Squeezing together, curling the toes, and release. Okay. Now let's practice some movements in coordination. So bring both the wrist and feet up in the same way, right? Flexing the wrist forwards using the muscle here. And this is much like the calf muscle of the shin here. So as we point the foot down, we can feel the forearm and the right lower leg at the same time. Try to feel the muscle pair working at the same time and at the same rate, right? Is the forearm working particularly harder than the calf, or is the calf squeezing harder than the forearm? Try to balance the contractions as best you can. Okay, now just the hands. See what difference you can feel in the forearms when you flex the forearms, rolling the wrist underneath. Right, for me, I feel a much stronger contraction on the right side. I'm going to pay attention to the left and see if I can boost that side a little bit. Good. Now attention to the feet, pushing up. I notice my right leg also seems a bit stronger than the left. Just using the mind to focus on the contraction inside of the muscles. Good. Now flexing the arms up, lifting from the fingertips, flexing the wrists as much as we can. You should feel the muscles on top of the forearm working. Again, trying to compare sides. Good. And the mirror image in the lower legs would be lifting the toes. Right? Again, trying to sense if the movement inside of the lower legs is symmetrical. Do you feel one foot going to the side, or does the movement really feel the same in both legs? If it doesn't feel the same, like for example, right now my left feels a little considerably different than the right. The right feels smooth and powerful. The left is pretty good for most of the movement, but at the top it feels like it gets stuck. So I'm going to slow down the movement and go carefully up and down and try to just feel the difference. Relaxing down to zero tension and again lifting up. Close the eyes, use the mind to focus on the muscles in the front of the shin as you do this. Sense the toes and how they're how they play a role in this movement as well. Good, now let's add the coordination of hands and feet together. So as we flex the feet up and feel the front of the shin, we also flex the hands up and feel both forearms and both shins working at the same time. Try to get the hands to touch the knees at the same time, and try to get the feet to touch the ground at the same time that the hands touch the knees. And see if you can get that coordination and awareness in space so that the movements are not only balanced in intensity, but also in the size of the movement and how much ground you cover and the speed of the movement, how quickly you return from full flexion to contact. Good. Let's move now to the elbows and knees, right? If we compare the hand to the foot, the forearm to the shin, now we're at the knee or the elbow. So for this, we're just going to use the isometric contraction as if you were gripping the elbow. You should feel the entire arm get firm, but you don't need to make a fist to do this. Technically, the wrist can stay relaxed, and we just tense the muscles around the elbow. Okay, it's kind of like making a fist with your elbow. So let's go back and forth from right side, squeezing the left side, releasing. Squeezing the right side, releasing. And again, look for a difference in how the arm activates. If you feel pain on one side, if you feel weakness or shaking in the muscles more so than the other side. And the main difference I feel right now is on the right side, I rack up a little bit more tension, but the elbow feels more stable. It doesn't shake as much. When I squeeze the left elbow, it immediately starts to chatter. So I'm going to, again, try to work on this problem. I'm going to slow down the contractions here and work from like a 0 to 10 idea, where I'm going to start with 0 contraction, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, squeezing the elbow maximum. And now in reverse, very slowly, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Trying to really get control over the full range of tension in the elbow. Right? Again, racking up tension, squeezing, 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 getting to full contraction. Slowly, with as many gradations as possible, return to 0 tension. Especially towards the end of the movement, right before you bottom out and reach 0 tension, full release in the elbow, pay attention to that area around 3, 2, 1, and see if you can expand that area. That's usually the area when you're releasing the isometric contraction that we start to gain relaxation. So if I squeeze, 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 I get to that 10, the arm shaking, releasing, 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 releasing. And here now I'm getting more careful. 3, 2, 2.5, 2, 1, half of 1, and finally 0 tension. Okay. Usually, the more details we can include towards the resting side of the tension, the more relaxation we can produce. Okay. Good. So I've improved a little bit here. So let's go back to both elbows squeezing. Hopefully, they feel slightly more symmetrical. I wouldn't say they feel more symmetrical, but the left is a little bit more alive right now. Okay, we're going to add the knees now. This is kind of a funny movement because no movement actually takes place. You're basically just sitting here and you try to grip the knee. So you may feel the lower leg get tense a little bit. You may feel the hamstrings turn on and the quadriceps turn on. And you want that. The leg should get pretty rigid all of a sudden and very firm, as if you were going to go to stand up. But you don't move. You just squeeze all the muscles around the knee. And let's go 5 or 6 times on each knee, developing the full tension around the knee. When you start, you may feel it's easier to rack up tension in the hamstrings versus the quadriceps. Right? But with each squeeze, you want to try to get a more full brace of tension around the knee. Right? You don't just make a fist with half the fingers, right? You make a full fist, full surrounding tension. So we get the same here. Right? You should feel some element of the ankle stiffening too, because we do want to use some of the muscles here, right? As the calf comes up actually to the femur. So that crosses here, and the hamstrings come down to the tibia. So this makes like an X between the two, coming up and going down. So we want both the calf and the hamstring and the quadriceps to turn on. We get that full squeeze in the knee. Okay, let's try the other side now. Yeah, you may even feel the inner thigh turning on, and it's great. Basically trying to just tense the entire leg. And on this side, I feel much more strong 360-degree contraction on this side. So I'm going to get a few more here on the left side, just getting used to my left knee. And now I'm going to take this again, revisit my other knee, and see how different the contraction feels. Right, when I first did my better side, I noticed this kind of pushed me backwards like a kick. Actually, the quadriceps were very happy to turn on. On my other side, I feel mostly the hamstrings come on. So I need to actually kick into the ground a little bit and try to get the quadriceps as if I were going to kick like this, right? To fire and push me back a little bit. There we go. Now I compare again how the left knee feels when I squeeze this. Full 360 contraction here. And now this side, much better. Much better when I add a little bit of kick. This really rounds out this knee for me. So you need to feel, one leg is going to feel more natural than the other, and you need to feel what is the difference. And then you need to install that contraction into the other side, okay, until you find better symmetry. Now let's revisit both knees at once. So I'm getting a little bit of a kicking back movement, and I feel the gripping underneath and releasing. Squeezing, releasing. Good, I'm getting decent symmetry in the legs, so I'm going to add the elbows back into this mix. So we're getting squeezing the elbows and the knees together. And releasing. Immediately have to close my eyes, it's a lot to focus on. Squeezing the elbows and knees together, 4 contractions at once. Try to keep the mind's eye bouncing between knee, knee, elbow, elbow, knee, knee, elbow, elbow. Again, you can always reduce the level of the contraction instead of going to 10 on all of them. Perhaps going to 6 would make it easier for the mind to feel more clearly what's going on. Squeezing and releasing to 0 tension again. Always returning to baseline 0 tension. Squeezing the knees and elbows, returning baseline tension. Okay, let's move on to the shoulders and hips now. And we've come up from ankle, knee, now we're at the hip. The hip of the arm is the shoulder. Okay, so how do we squeeze the hips in a sitting position? Well, it's the same. You basically just want to try to co-contract all the muscles around the hip, including the glutes and the inner thighs and some of the quadriceps, right? Again, you don't have to worry about actually what is contracting, but more importantly, the sensation of how it feels when each side contracts. Again, we're just trying to create more symmetry in our baseline hip activation. All right, so if I try to make my left hip firm and tense as much of my hip as I can, just squeeze that. I feel some deeper tension, maybe inside the pelvis, definitely the inner thigh. The butt is squeezing. It kind of pops me up into the chair a little bit. I feel like the whole hip gets firm. That's what I want. Pretty well rounded, it feels like at the moment. Let's drop down and check the other side. Again, squeezing everything. This is a lot harder. This side is really trying to figure out where the contraction should go. I have to focus hard on getting my inner thigh to engage on this side. Check again the other side. A lot easier here. In both cases, I get a pretty good amount of glute activation that pushes me up off the chair, so I'm happy about that. But this right side inner thigh is a little bit estranged from my body, as is the left, honestly. So in order to try to improve the symmetry in my hips, it looks like I'm having a problem activating the inner thighs. If you felt one glute was less active than the other, you'll probably want to open the legs outwards compared to what I'm going to do. Here I'm going to compare the contraction inwards. So I just put the fists here and I squeeze both the knees in against the thighs, growing the contraction to a 10, and slowly, slowly releasing. I'll repeat this a few times, just getting the control over the muscle, getting a very deep contraction, and releasing slowly through the gradations of release to zero tension. And again, squeezing, 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 and releasing, releasing, releasing. And releasing, releasing, releasing. Good, I'm going to revisit just tensing the hips now after I got some nice balance contractions in the inner thighs. So I'll start with what I thought was my better side. Oh, totally different. Not only does it pop me up, but it also draws me to that side. So I know that the inner thigh is now pulling me in like this. Yeah, and the hip comes back into my body now. Super change there. Let's see on the right. Yeah, and that's good. The same happens on the right now. So that's very interesting. When I first started, I was getting plenty of glute activation and a little bit in the hip flexors, but I wasn't getting a clear activation from the inner thighs. Now, arguably, I'm getting a little bit too much. So I'm going to go ahead and balance the outside of the legs. So here I'm just going to squeeze against the legs and try to press out a little bit and then slowly release to zero tension. This would probably be done better with a band or in a narrow space, so you just have walls, so you don't have to use your arms, but it should be okay. We don't have to push terribly hard to feel the muscles. For example, even here now, I feel this hip starting to cramp up as I push out into my hands. And no cramp on the other side, so some kind of weakness is going on here. Pushing out again, slowly releasing to zero tension. And as we squeeze again, looking for the symmetry in the activation. Okay, let's retest now the tensing of the hip. Fantastic. Now it doesn't shoot me back so far, as I've added some controlled tension to the outside and the inside. Much better. Kind of pops me up on the glute, but I can now feel the inner thigh and outer hip fighting each other in this direction to keep it centered. And that's what we want, a more full contraction around the joint. I'm just making a fist with each hip and comparing the activation. Much better. Okay, let's visit the shoulders now. We're just going to do the same thing up here. First, I'm going to make a fist with the left shoulder. That just means tensing the shoulder joint, however, whatever that means to you right now. Right? But it shouldn't involve the elbow or the wrist. There's no fist making, right? Just squeezing the muscles of the shoulder. This might include the chest, deltoids, maybe something around the shoulder blades, even into the low back area, things like that. Okay, just look for what the contraction feels like on one side and releasing. A few times here, then we'll compare. Good, now I'm going to compare the contraction on my other side. Ooh, this one's kind of painful and does not want to contract all the way. Very, very different sides here. I'll try again with less tension here, ramping up like a 5, like a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll probably stay there. More comfortable. I'm getting quite a bit more deltoid activation on the side. You see how the arm becomes rigid out to the side. When I squeeze my left, I really don't get that at all. It still hangs next to me. So I'm not getting the same contraction at all on these sides. Getting a lot of rotator cuff on the left. It can still move freely even though I'm squeezing it. The right side really gets stuck because of the deltoid activation. So I actually think that I'm missing the deltoid activation on this side. So the deltoid we can activate is the bigger muscle on the outside. So when you squeeze your shoulder, if the outside still feels jello soft, you're missing the deltoid. That's what was going on this arm. So I'm going to revisit here, squeezing with the deltoid now. And if you want to feel that more clearly, you can just lift the arm to the side. You'll feel the deltoid muscle get very firm. It's very big. It's the most superficial muscle there. Okay, so again, squeezing the shoulder. There we go. Now I'm getting the deltoid. Going back and forth, feeling the shoulder squeezing the way it wants, comparing, drawing in what was missing. And I should be able to achieve both coordinations. So I also want to be able to tense my right shoulder without the deltoid kicking in, so that I can hang more loose like the left, even under contraction. So as I squeeze that, I can achieve it, but it doesn't feel natural on the right side. So I'm going to stick with the full deltoid contraction. And again, over here, this also includes the bicep muscle, is mostly a shoulder muscle. Even though we think of it as the muscle that helps us bend the elbow, it gets all that leverage from the shoulder. And it also helps lift the arm forwards when the palm is up like this. And usually the bicep gets injured and causes problems in the shoulder. It's very rare that it actually causes problems in the elbow, sometimes, but the majority of pesky bicep problems are coming up here and its attachment to the shoulder joint. So we actually want to be able to get both the tricep and the bicep involved in this isometric contraction. Right, now you can see my left arm is not as loose as it was when I first started doing these contractions. I'm getting a much more full sense of the arm now. I was really leaving out a lot of muscles on that side. Okay, it's getting pretty symmetrical for me now. I'm feeling a lot more activation in the back of my body. So I'm going to try to combine that with the hips now. There's going to be a lot of focus because it's a lot of big muscles. So again, we're using the mind's eye going into both shoulders and both hips as we flex all together. All right, looking for that isometric level. Good. Again, squeezing, ramping up the tension, and slowly releasing through the tension. Don't let it all bottom out at once. Go as gradually as possible back to zero tension. Again, ramping up the tension in the shoulders and hips, looking for symmetry. And again, bringing this down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 tension. Again, ramping up in the hips, this time my glutes coming on. Squeezing the shoulders tightly, looking for the symmetry, both biceps, and slowly releasing. Let's get one more of those, squeezing hips and shoulders together, looking for symmetrical contraction. And slowly releasing. I'll admit that was a tough one to keep track of. So there was a lot going on there. Okay, so that covers both of our arms and legs. So far, we're doing pretty good with that. Let's look more at some building of coordinations. Right, so if we're working with the feet, making fists, squeezing, then lifting. And going up onto the toes. Forearms going. and flexing, looking for that smooth 4-point symmetry coming down together. Good. And we'll use the knees and elbows together. Right? We can do this in standing. We want to practice basically, even though the lower body mirrors the upper body mirrors the lower body, what we want to do is as we bend the elbow forwards, this is the same as bending the knee backwards, because this also keeps us in balance. Then we have some weight in the front of the body and also some weight in the back of the body, and we're more balanced. Right? The weight comes up both the front and the back at the same time. And we just try to coordinate the flexing of the elbow and the knee at the same time. Let's try the other side. This side's quite a bit easier for me. Again, keeping the mind's eye in the joints. Good. We can view some of the same movements that we've done in the shoulders, right? If we were to move together like this, but we usually don't do that. We don't really want to walk like this. Usually we train the arms in opposition, right? So here we can feel the full legs doing the separate, right? So let's see if we can coordinate the upper and body through this reciprocal movement, upper and lower body through reciprocal movement. So if we want to use our walking pattern we're used to, right? Let's see what the mirror would be. Right? As I come here, I need to go here. Right? And now you can see how all of these things moving the same, right? The elbow is matching the knee, the hip is matching the shoulder, the hip is matching the shoulder. All right? Flexing backwards, flexing forwards, balancing. Right? And we can even mimic what's going on at the ankle as we go. Okay, let's try that on the other side. Good, if we add them together. All the time trying to sense how the upper body and lower body are in balance and harmony. They're moving the same, right? It makes my buttons stay right where they are down the middle of my body so that there's no excessive shifting or twisting out of alignment, right? I can stay right down the center line when I move the lower and upper body in harmony with that. Okay, so this was an interesting look at how to use isometric contractions to develop some control in the extremities and body. I don't use this at work too often, but it has helped me in the past, especially like what I discovered today, some very big difference in the halves of my body. So I think that that final exercise was probably the most valuable of the session, about understanding how in the walking pattern that the joints of the upper and lower body should mirror each other. And we spent some time today slowly developing that. Okay, so tomorrow we'll probably have a more general vigorous exercise, get back to our full body stimulation. Okay, have a great day. Bye-bye.